Oh my gosh, it's final exams time for a lot of you. So I think this is a really good time for some preparation. And the preparation can be either the chemistry side of things or just the mental side of things. But regardless of what you need, I'm hoping that I can help you out today. Now, it's possible you don't have a final exam right now, in which case this still might be helpful for any kind of exam or just ways to improve your chemistry studying. So let's do it. It's chemistry final exam. And the first thing is that a final exam in chemistry, that's a lot of material. So just acknowledge, yes, it's a lot. And you do have good reason to, we're not going to put a big smile on them, but we're going to put a little smile because we're going to acknowledge that because it is a lot of material, what tends to happen here is that the questions tend to be bigger picture. And when they're bigger picture, that means that the questions won't be as detail oriented. They will be overall simpler than the types of questions that you would get on a regular exam or even on a quiz, depending on your professor. So I do want you to, when you're focusing on your overall studying, to think about that idea of bigger picture. Okay, and you might be saying, all right, Professor K, what do you mean by that? What does that mean? How is that going to help me when I'm sitting down and I'm trying to prepare? So I think focusing on this idea that they're probably not going to try to trick you. So when you have a chance to practice two different kinds of problems, that it's okay to go with the simpler one, with the more straightforward one, because that's probably a better type of problem to practice with. Which leads to this next idea, practice, okay? So you definitely want to get as much practice as you can. And I think practicing is better than just reviewing notes. So I would prioritize practice. And one of the best ways I found to do practice is to look at the old exams. And when I say old exams, I mean from this semester or from this term that you're in. Because presumably you have been given exams that you're now going to be tested over in the final, right? So you've taken these exams. And hopefully, after you took the exam, the professor or teacher gave you an answer key. Okay? So, what I would do go over and try to retake your old exams. Now, some professors, they provide blank exams, and then you can take it, print it out, and take it just like you were going to take the exam. Now, some of them don't do that, but you could simulate that with the exams that have already been filled out. So, for example, I have an exam here. I could show you. It has some questions. And so on this page, let's pretend like I'm the student. And here's a question that gives quantum numbers. It gives 4 quantum numbers. And then it's asking, which orbital is that in? And I already filled it out. But if you had an exam like this that you already took, and you got back, you could cover up your answers. And you could try to retake this exam. And usually enough time has passed that you don't remember exactly what it was. And so it's usually a pretty representative way to take exams. And one of the best reasons for this is that it gives you the type of questions that your teacher asks. And that alone is gold, right? Because each of us asks different kinds of questions. And we have different styles, and we have different emphases. And being able to interpret the kinds of things that they think are important will help you do better. That's one of the reasons why it's easier to do better and really learn and understand the information from a course that has a specific professor and you're learning from them and they're asking you questions rather than standardized tests, because standardized tests are written for anybody and everybody and they're very generic. And it's possible that your professor didn't cover the material that's on a standardized exam. Whereas this final you're about to take, you know that professor, you know all the material, or at least you know what the list of material that will be on the exam could be. And that's going to help you a ton. Okay. Now, if your teacher is giving you a standardized exam, then that's harder. That's more of when I would hope that they would give you some indicators or lists of the kinds of things for you to study. Because that's just, studying everything. That's just too much. Okay. So what else can you do? The practice. So let's say you practice and you go through the old exams. You use the answer key to check. All right. And here is where you identify your weaknesses. And then you have to make an assessment. Is it worth focusing on trying to learn these things before the exam, or to focus on your strengths so that you can totally crush it on the topics that you know really well. And just accept the fact that you will miss points on your weaknesses. And this is how I'm going to help you decide how to approach this. And this would be, if your weakness is a fundamental concept, if it's a fundamental, this is where you should really put in the time. And this could be getting a tutor or going on YouTube. Maybe I have a video on that topic. Because it's going to help you do better on the other parts of the exam. So this would be something like stoichiometry that is used in many different other kinds of problems. Understanding concentration, moles per liter, and then how to get moles from that. Things like that that are fundamental. I highly recommend. Okay, on the other hand, if it's a one-off kind of problem that they might not even ask, then that's where I suggest focusing on other things that you know better so that you do really well on those. Okay. By the way, everything I'm talking about, this is when you're just a couple days away from the final exam. If I was talking about how to prepare at the beginning of the semester or the beginning of the term, of how to approach the whole course and learn as much as you can, then I would be giving different pieces of advice. But this, at this point, you just want to do your best on this exam and then go on from there. Okay. I think another thing that is good to mention now has to do with whether or not you either have to memorize or whether you are allowed to bring in a sheet of paper, or if you are given a sheet that has all of the maybe equations and constants and things like that, supplementary information. So if you do need to memorize, sorry. I hope you don't need to memorize too much. I don't like my student stuff to memorize. I want to see more of their problem-solving techniques, you know? I think that's a lot more valuable. Okay? But if you, are expected to memorize, I do highly recommend learning some memorization techniques. And one of my favorites techniques, is things like making up a song that goes along with it. There was a point when I had to memorize the periodic table, which is kind of ridiculous, but anyway. And I made up a song so that I could memorize it. This was back in the day before the periodic table song. I think everybody knows. It's on ASAP Science. It's such a good song. But I made up my own. And there are other types of mnemonic devices like that. And there's also some other techniques just in general. If you look up memory and, oh my gosh, I forgot the name of it. It's the castle. Oh my goodness. Anyway, it's actually really amazing because you visualize yourself walking through your house or walking through some place that you know really well. And let's say you had to memorize Avogadro's number. Again, I think that would be just terrible for someone to expect people to memorize a bunch of constants, but let's just say that you were asked to do that. And so this memorization technique, let's use 4 sig figs there. Okay. So this is Avogadro's number. Now, I have it memorized because I use it so much over so many years, so I think it would be impossible for me to not know it. But in any case, per mole. Okay. So Avogadro's number, this many of anything are in 1 mole per mole. And so the way this technique works is that you imagine, like, I walk through my front door, and sitting right as I walk in my front door are 6 cupcakes. There's like a half dozen cupcakes. And I'm like, ooh, cupcakes, are they chocolate? This looks amazing. And that is this vision that I have as I walk in my door. And then I imagine that I walk into my living room, and sitting on the floor of my living room is a little black dot. Let's say there's like a big ink splatter from my India ink on my floor. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what the heck? What happened here? I have all this ink on my floor, this big dot. And maybe that would help me remember that there's a period there. And then I walk through my living room and into my kitchen. And I'm really hoping that dinner's made, but it's not. There's no dinner. There's 0 dinner. And then I feel really upset or sad or hungry or something. So it goes on from there. Then I, go down the stairs to the basement, and there's 2 of something. And the idea here is that you tie in numbers with a thing that really makes you either feel something, or you're surprised, or it's really bizarre, it's memorable, it locks into your brain. It's incredible how this works. If you go through this process, I was able to memorize a sequence of 20 random numbers the first time I tried this technique, and I couldn't even believe it. I was so surprised. So anyway, that's one thing, that's one memorization technique I have found works, along with mnemonic devices, along with songs, poetry, things that are funny, all that kind of stuff. So, and I should maybe put an S here. Okay. The last thing I'm going to say in this video has to do with more of a mindset and just your physical well-being, and how important it is to get enough rest. And so, because I know that it's unrealistic for me to say don't stay up late, get sleep, and then have everyone do it. That's just not how it's going to happen. And I say that because, first off, I've given lots of final exams, and many of my students come in and they have not slept. But more importantly, I know this from personal experience. I cannot tell you how many times I have pulled an all-nighter. So I know the realistic aspect of that. It just happens. We do it. And I think part of it is we do it because it's like, okay, if I can just push through, and then I can sleep tomorrow, kind of feeling. And there's some truth to that. So in any case, what you can do is you can actually front load and try to get good rest and good food and all that stuff in the days leading up, so that if you do pull an all-nighter, or maybe you don't get much sleep, that at least your body will be able to handle it better, and you will be a little bit more alert, and your memory will work better, and things like that. Okay, I said there was one more thing, but I'm going to keep saying things as I remember them. And that has to do with anxiety. Now, if you normally do have anxiety, I'm going to guess that you have learned techniques to deal with it. And when you're in an exam, it can be really exacerbated. And that's difficult. And so one thing you can do is you can ask for help. And what I mean by that is that you can't ask a professor. You can't just go up and say, hey, can you help me with this problem during an exam? But what you can do is you can ask clarifying questions during an exam. And so here, I'm going to bring this exam back here. So let's see, I'm going to give you an example. So this one, let's see. I guess I could talk about with any of these. Identify the orbital shown on the right for which n equals 3. And here's the orbital. Okay. So you could ask if they're expecting anything more than just 2 pieces of information. Here, n equals 3, principal quantum number. You show that there. And then here, by the shape of the orbital, you could then identify this as a d orbital. But one could get even more precise and could call this a 3D XY orbital. It could also be 3D YZ or 3D XZ. But you can't tell which one of those three this is without the Cartesian coordinate axis system. So that's why I'm not asking for that. This is as much information as you can give with the information supplied here. So you could ask the professor about that. And just by talking through it, let's say you were like, I have no idea what kind of orbital this is when I first saw it. Let's just say that that's how you're thinking at the time. But just by talking through it, it might come to you. You might go, wait a minute, I remember those atomic orbitals that are shaped like clover leaves. Yeah, those are the d orbitals, So there's something about just having a brief discussion. Now, obviously, you can't go through and talk about the whole exam with the professor during the exam. But you could even have little conversations in your head about each of these and trying to come at it from a different approach. I'm also a really big proponent of skipping over problems and moving on and then coming back to them, because sometimes there's something later in the exam that jogs your memory, and then you can go back and you can do better on those kinds of problems. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Please let me know if there are any topics that might be helpful for you as you head into finals week. For those of us on the semester system, it's happening in May, and those of you who are on the quarter system, it's in June, or if you're in high school, usually June. If you're in a country outside of the United States, then it could be another exam schedule. But regardless of when you are facing your final exams, all of these things are pertinent. All these things are worth thinking about. And you can do it. It can feel a little bit scary, and especially if your confidence is down from other scores. But I will tell you, I have seen students totally pull up their overall grade in the class from doing well on the final. So if you put in the time, and you put in the time in the right ways, you can totally do it and bring your grade up. Absolutely. Okay? Alright, I hope this was helpful for you. Please let me know if you have any questions at all, or if there's anything else I can help you with. So, until next time, happy chemistry-ing.